Have you ever wondered how a wealthy and flourishing nation like the United States ended up in the economic catastrophe known as the Great Depression? It's a question that baffles many, even to this day. A country that was once the epitome of prosperity and economic strength found itself plunged into a decade-long period of poverty and despair. The 1920s, often referred to as the Roaring Twenties, were a time of unprecedented economic growth and societal change. The United States in particular was basking in the glow of financial prosperity. But in a sudden and shocking turn of events, this period of prosperity came to a screeching halt. The stock market crash of 1929 marked the beginning of what would become the most severe and prolonged economic downturn in the history of the Western industrialized world. To answer that question, we need to step back and take a look at the events leading up to this unprecedented economic disaster. The 1920s, often referred to as the Roaring Twenties, was a time of great prosperity and economic growth in the United States. Dive into this era, and you'd find a nation humming with industry, streets bustling with consumers, and the stock market soaring to dizzying heights. It was a decade marinated in optimism, a period when the American dream seemed within everyone's reach. The Roaring Twenties, as we fondly remember them, were characterized by substantial economic growth. A post-war boom, coupled with technological advances, spurred a surge in productivity. Factories churned out goods at an unprecedented rate, and America's GDP skyrocketed. Underpinning this economic surge was a new cultural phenomenon: consumerism. The advent of mass production made goods more affordable, and for the first time, ordinary Americans could participate in the luxury of choice. This was the era of the flapper dress and the Model T Ford, items that symbolized the newfound purchasing power of the American people. Meanwhile, the stock market became the nation's playground. Shares were bought and sold at a frenzied pace, with prices climbing higher and higher. It was an intoxicating dance of numbers, one that promised wealth beyond imagination. Many Americans, from bankers to janitors, plunged headfirst into this frenzied ballet of speculation. Yet, amid the glitter and the glamour, a stark reality was taking shape. The prosperity of the Roaring Twenties was not evenly distributed. The rich were getting richer, while the middle class and the poor were left grappling with rising living costs. This increasing wealth disparity created an unstable foundation for the economy. The Roaring Twenties in retrospect were a time of stark contrasts. They were years of prosperity and growth, of consumerism and speculation. Yet they were also years of deepening wealth inequality. This was the paradox of the Roaring Twenties, a decade that shimmered with promise, yet trembled with underlying economic fragility. But as we'll soon see, this period of prosperity was not built on solid ground. On October 29, 1929, also known as Black Tuesday, the stock market crashed, marking the beginning of the Great Depression. This was the day when the bubble of economic prosperity burst. The Roaring Twenties, a decade of growth, prosperity, and wild stock market speculation, came to a screeching halt. Stocks that were once considered safe bets plummeted in value, some to the point of being worthless. Investors who had once been so confident were left in financial ruin. Black Tuesday was not a single-day event. It was the culmination of a series of declines that started in September of that year. Investor confidence began to waver as production slowed and unemployment started to rise. Panic set in, and on that fateful day in October, a record 12.9 million shares were traded. The stock market lost around $30 billion in value, an amount greater than the annual budget of the US government or the cost of World War I. The immediate aftermath of the crash was catastrophic. Banks, having invested heavily in the market, found themselves on the brink of bankruptcy. Many folded, taking with them the life savings of ordinary citizens. This led to a domino effect as more banks failed, resulting in a severe contraction of the money supply. Unemployment soared as businesses, unable to secure loans due to the banking crisis, had to lay off workers or close down entirely. By 1933, almost a quarter of the American workforce was unemployed, a stark contrast to the low unemployment rate of the Roaring Twenties. The crash not only affected the United States but also other countries, particularly those dependent on the American economy. International trade declined drastically as countries erected trade barriers in a bid to protect their own industries. The shock of the crash was just the beginning, as the effects of the Great Depression would be felt for years to come. The stock market crash of 1929 served as a harsh reminder of the dangers of unchecked speculation and the fragility of the global economic system. It was a lesson learned the hard way, and its impact still echoes in the annals of financial history. The Great Depression was not just a single event, but a series of economic downturns that lasted for over a decade. This era, spanning the early 1930s to the outbreak of the Second World War, saw an intensity of hardship that left few corners of America untouched. Imagine, if you will, an economic catastrophe so profound that 1 in every 4 workers found themselves without a job. That's right. A staggering 25% of the American workforce was unemployed at the height of the Depression in 1933, but the repercussions extended far beyond the realm of employment. The era was marked by an environmental disaster known as the Dust Bowl. Severe drought and poor farming practices led to widespread soil erosion across the Great Plains. Towering dust storms, dubbed black blizzards, swept across the land, rendering farming near impossible and forcing many families to abandon their homes. The struggles of everyday Americans during this time are heart-wrenching. Families were evicted from their homes, unable to pay their mortgages or rent. Many roamed the country in search of work, often living in makeshift shantytowns known as Hoovervilles, a grim nod towards then-President Herbert Hoover. Food was scarce, and bread lines and soup kitchens became a common sight. Children bore the brunt of these hardships too. Schools across the country closed down due to lack of funds, and many children had to forgo their education to help support their families. The effects of the Depression were not just economic but social and psychological as well. Yet in the face of such adversity, the resilience of the American people was truly remarkable. Communities banded together, supporting each other through shared resources and mutual aid. People found creative ways to make ends meet, whether through bartering, home gardening, or taking on multiple jobs. Despite the hardships, the American people did not give up, and the country began to look for ways to recover. This resilience and determination would become the bedrock upon which America would build its recovery in the years to follow. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt implemented a series of programs known as the New Deal, aimed at recovery and reform. The New Deal was like a breath of fresh air for a nation gasping for survival. Its programs were designed to provide relief for the unemployed and poor, recovery of the economy back to normal levels, and reform of the financial system to prevent a repeat depression. Let's take a closer look at some of these programs. The Civilian Conservation Corps, or CCC, provided jobs for young unemployed men who worked on projects related to conservation and development of natural resources in rural lands. The Works Progress Administration, or WPA, was another key program. It employed millions to carry out public works projects, including the construction of public buildings and roads. And then there was the Social Security Act, a landmark legislation that established a system of old age benefits for workers, benefits for victims of industrial accidents, unemployment insurance, and aid for dependent mothers and children, the blind, and the physically handicapped. The New Deal had a profound effect on the American society and economy. It brought about immediate changes and provided a safety net for Americans, creating a welfare state for the first time in the country's history. It also led to a major shift in the political landscape, with the Democratic Party becoming the majority party for the next 3 decades. But it was not the New Deal alone that ended the Great Depression. The start of World War II in the late 30s spurred massive military spending, rejuvenating the American economy. The war effort pulled the United States out of the Depression and ushered in a period of economic prosperity. The Great Depression was a time of great hardship, but it was also a time of resilience and recovery. The New Deal and the onset of World War II were pivotal in helping America rise from the ashes of economic ruin, reflecting the indomitable spirit of the American people. So, to answer our original question, how did the Great Depression happen? Let's take a moment to recap our journey. We began in the Roaring '20s, a time of prosperity and excess, where the promise of endless growth seemed almost tangible. But as we've seen, this was a mirage that hid the underlying economic imbalances. The year 1929 marked the onset of a harsh reality with the stock market crash. In a blink, fortunes vanished, businesses collapsed, and a time of profound economic despair, the Great Depression, set in. It wasn't just a financial crisis, but a human one, affecting millions worldwide. In response, the 30s saw unprecedented government intervention under the New Deal, aiming to stimulate recovery and prevent future crises. These recovery efforts were a testament to human resilience and the power of collective action. The Great Depression was a complex event with many causes and effects, but it serves as a stark reminder of the importance of economic stability and resilience.